Of Matt McElheny talking about 5-ounce racer, revving up Pinewood Derby software in Python.
Morning, everybody, or afternoon, really. You guys ready for day 2, Pi Ohio? Yay! All right. So today we're going to talk about building custom Pinewood Derby software. And the Pinewood Derby, if you don't know, is an annual Cub Scouting event where kids within all the different dens within the pack get together on race day with these little blocks of wood and these little plastic wheels and these nails and their imagination. And they have created these race cars that blow down the track. And so our pack has a custom-made track, and we have custom software. So last year, I attended Pi Ohio for the first time, and so I am perhaps less experienced with Python than many of you out there in the audience. So anybody that's used Python for maybe less than 2 years? All right, good. You're part of my target audience. And then anybody that has got quite a bit of experience with Python, either professionally or as a hobbyist. One of the things I'll be talking about during this presentation is just my experience in moving from the .NET development world into the Python world, and really what it's like for a noob to the Python ecosystem to make that transition. So let me start out a little bit by telling you who I am. My name, again, is Matt McElheny. I am a father of 3 kids. I have been in IT for probably 15 years, mostly working with Microsoft technologies and on the Microsoft stack. But my personal time, I much prefer to work on different things. I'm a bit of a polyglot. I like to learn a lot of different languages and see how different ecosystems within the IT community evolve, and always keep my skills sharp. So we just talked about who this talk is for, and really what you should take away is that Python is extremely useful for a lot of different purposes, and you don't have to be a professional Python developer to really understand all the different ins and outs of Python. It's got a very low barrier to entry, and there's a lot of amazing things you can do with it. So since we're a little bit talking about Pinewood Derby and Cub Scouts, I wanted to show you my boys. So these are my 2 competitors that will be doing Pinewood Derbies for their time during Cub Scouts. And I have to say, parenting is harder than programming. Computers always do exactly what you tell them to, even if it wasn't quite what you meant. Kids aren't quite like that at all. So anyway, these guys love scouting. I was never a scout myself, but as a parent, you get involved in the things that your kids like. So this was a neat opportunity for me to use my calling and my skill set to help my kids do something. Hilliard community, so I'm actually local. Oh, do you? So anyway, these are my boys, and they're all about building the fastest car. So, but wait, there is another. Just as a quick aside, this is probably, in my estimation, one of the dumbest scenes in Star Wars. Yoda should probably have just perished and become a ghost so he wouldn't have had so much trouble conveying the message to Luke. But regardless, wait, there is another. Your sister. So just because we tend to think of Cub Scouting as a boys' event, it's not. I don't speak for my pack, but I'm a parent volunteer, and every kid from every background is more than welcome to attend any event, campouts, derbies, whatever. So this is my daughter, and she's giving her Eye of the Tiger face, and she has her Hello Kitty Car of Doom. She makes absolutely no ifs, ands, or buts about putting a pink race car on the track. So I think it's, just a quick aside, I think it's really important to note that there have been a lot of talks, and there's even one later on this afternoon about sexism in our industry, the overabundance of males. I want to, just sort of call out that, I want my daughter to have really every opportunity that I had. My boys are not at all interested in programming, at least not at this age. So she's interested in Hello Kitty, and I kind of threw a little Hello World in there, and we'll see if she's the one that turns out to be the one that's interested in programming. So, all right. Let's talk some technology. First off, never given a presentation like this before. Thank you for being gracious with me as I do this. So we talked a little bit about what a Pinewood Derby is, and I think it's important for us as developers to not just jump to the keyboard and start building a solution, because that's really, I think, our tendency. We're solution providers as developers. We are constantly thinking about how we would architect that thing, and sometimes it's important to really look at what the problem domain is and make sure that you're not just viewing everything as a nail, that you're not just pulling the hammer you're used to out of the toolbox to go build the thing you're looking to build. So Pinewood Derby, we talked about really the purpose. It's for kids to have an opportunity to compete against one another with something that's pretty easy for them to make. The rules are pretty simple. You have to create a car out of a block of wood. Can't weigh more than 5 ounces. That car needs to use plastic wheels. There's certain kinds of lubricant you can use. They get a whole rule book. But one of the biggest rules is parents can only help the kids with the parts that are dangerous for the kids to do. These are really for the kids to build. But we have sibling competition and adult leader competition as well. So you can get into the more sophisticated cars and also have, as my daughter is a little too young to use the Dremel, you can have you can have some folks that have a little bit of help, but it's an age-appropriate amount of help. So let's talk about the track. And really, I swear, we're going to get to the technology very quickly, but I want to make sure we go over the problem domain so we understand, because some of you may or may not have ever seen or participated in a Pinewood Derby before. So we have a completely custom-built track, 5 feet high. It's more than 30 feet long. It's got 8 lanes, but we don't actually want to use all 8 lanes because there may be a different number of racers. So part of the software is really tailored around figuring out what's the most appropriate number of lanes to use for the number of competitors and putting buys in the extra lanes to make sure that the race is divided up evenly. So, show you a little bit of the hardware here. So at the other end of the track, there's a timer. I've got the timer here, and there is a circuit board that we have fabricated that has a couple of Cat5 connectors on it. It's got a wired connector that goes up to the top of the track where there's a gate. So when the track operator pulls the lever and the cars start going down, the gate separates its connection, sends a signal down the wire, shows up here, starts the timer. There is also, I know it's really hard to see, there's also a set of dip switches on here where you can set what number of lanes you're going to run. And you don't really want to change the number of lanes while you're racing. So it's important to look at all the different competitors and make sure that you've got the right number of lanes that you're running. And software is really helpful to help you do that. So this is the timer. And it is an extremely archaic timer. It is, it's got 8 lanes. It's got a serial port, which we've got a USB converter, and it plugs in, and there's a driver that we can use to do the USB converter. All right, so Derby cars, we talked a little bit about the Derby cars. And what you get is just a very simple kit. The kids go home, they spend 3 or 4 weeks, they come back, and ta-da. They've got these cool little cars to go down the track. So a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy spent in doing these. And one of the challenges is you don't want to walk in on race day and have your custom-built crappy software blow up these kids' race day, right? That's It's not where you want to be. So there are 4 different things that I identified that we needed as part of this software package. We needed a reader for the timer, something to take the timing measurements. We needed a way to display the race results. So what times did the kids just get as they went down the track? Who's on deck next so that we can keep the cycle flowing during race day? We need an operator interface for the track admin. So if there's a problem with the timer reading, they got to be able to back it out. They got to be able to get the roster in of the kids, all that kind of stuff. And then at the end, there's got to be a way to publish these results. All right, so we talked a little bit about some of the challenges here. We're going to, for the roster, you've got all these kids that have signed up to race. Some of them aren't going to actually bring in cars. So they might be on the roster, but they might not be eligible on race day. They might have some problems with their car that creates an ineligible problem. There are 8 lanes on the track. There might be a number of competitors that's evenly divisible by 5. So you got to be able to, within the software, figure out the buys. And somebody might show up a half hour late and bring their car and want to race on the track. And you kind of like, well, we've already started, tough cookies, or do you develop that in? So. Timer, for the timer software, one of the big challenges is this thing's pretty out of date and it's kind of expensive. So we're not looking to go and buy another timer right away. That's a big fundraiser to go get that kind of thing going. So I got to use a timer that's older. I have a need for a simulator because I don't want to lug this timer around. I don't want to drop it. I don't want to, spill something on it. This is not my timer. This is PAX timer. So I need to be able to have my software talk to it, have it be reliable and tested, but also be able to have a simulator for it. And then on race day, inevitably, there's malfunctions. There's bad timings. So I have to be able to rerun a race. All right? My kids are going to get older. I'm not going to be the Pinewood Derby guru for our pack forever. I got to be able to hand this off to somebody, right? So I need some piece of software for this, some software package that maybe runs on a Raspberry Pi that sits right there with the track that somebody can just plug in and go. I need something that will run on any platform, can be used by anybody. So I don't want to require somebody to have a Windows machine with Microsoft Office at a certain version and all that kind of stuff. I need something that's going to grow and scale. And then a couple other design requirements. I got to make sure that kids aren't still running on the same lanes every race. I got to make sure that we've got the proper timings and the round calculations and all that kind of stuff, so that slower racers move to the first heats and faster racers move to the later heats, so that as the race goes on and as the Derby continues. The faster cars are actually competing with one another. At first, you don't really know who's competing. Got to have some unit tests, right? I got to make sure that if we swap out pieces and parts to this, everything works. This is an interesting challenge of this software, is that it's live operated. Now, how often do you run software that you actually have to be there live running? Usually it's published and somebody else is the user. Well, surprise, you're live under pressure running this stuff. So one of the other challenges is parents. They're going to come up to you and they're going to go, hey, my kid's been running on this lane for too long, or I don't think this is right, or whatever. And you gotta, you can't really say to a parent, I have a unit test for that. I'm sure it's fine, So anyway, of course we're at Pi Ohio. You know the answer to this question, but geez, what can I use to help me create a solution that meets today's needs and tomorrow's unknown? And this is really the quintessential question for any software developer, and it can be really tempting to go with the new shiny. It can also be really tempting to stick with the hammer that's always in your toolbox, the trusty thing you always know how to use. So, I'm a .NET guy, been doing .NET for a long time. Geez, why don't I just do this in C#? It all works, right? Yeah, C#, it feels like work. It feels like work. There's so much ceremony to everything. If I never have to declare another interface on my personal hobby projects, my work projects, whatever, somebody else is paying me to do that. But my personal hobby projects, geez, I don't want it to feel like work. I'll never open up the editor, right? Rails, hey, awesome sauce, right? Ruby is, this very pretty language to read, and they've done all this work to get to this, DSL domains.
In the Cub Scout community.
Exactly. Here's my problem with Rails, and I better don my asbestos suit before saying this, but it's really hard to write if you're not immersed in that culture, if you're not immersed in that ecosystem, if you're not doing it all the time. So, as a weekend software warrior, I don't want to have to pick something up and go, "What the heck was I doing?" And that's how Rails feels to me. There's all these colon variables, which really are frankly just strings to me. So it's a lot of magic that goes on. So nothing bad for the folks that love it, but it's pretty hard for me as a weekend warrior to do much on the Ruby side. So, JavaScript, there's Node.js, right? Here's the new awesome sauce, right? But I'm sure you've all seen this joke before. Here's JavaScript and this little teeny book. Here's the good parts, right? JavaScript is a bit of a necessary evil, and frankly, you get into all this insane nesting. So the Russian doll kind of effect of your code, right? So, hey, so what about Python? Hey, the Holy Grail. So I got to tell you, my first exposure to Python was, Eric Scott Raymond's little essay back in, I think it was 2003, and I picked up Python, took a look at it, and it was okay, but I didn't really have any practical use for it. Last year, PyOhio was the place where it really got me jazzed about doing it again. So, most of you probably have way more Python experience than me, but I think it's important to kind of just realize what is going on in the Python ecosystem that can attract new talent, new developers. So you all know Python's mature, stood the test of time, it's well maintained, recognized in the job market. There's a robust ecosystem, conferences like this, there's lots of developers, lots of libraries, lots of resources for learning, the interwebs where you can do your own research. So, and one of the key pieces is there's a low barrier to entry. You don't have to know a ton to get started. And for my purposes, batteries are included. I don't have to worry about a bunch of libraries that are going to go out of date. A lot of stuff's prepackaged with it, and it's free. So Python was a good answer to my question here. So thanks for bearing with me through my selection process. It's time to code. So let's start with the timer. Seems like this one could be tough. Amazingly, there are actually docs out there on this timer. And let's see if I can. Will that help me? Yeah, okay. Oh, my fault. Give me a quick second here. All right. So amazingly, user guide out there. And it's got a whole lot of information in it, but the main piece is the diagram for how you got to set it up. Hey, read the manual, right? And then a lot of information about how the serial port works. So it is, if I read the docs, let's see. Oh. It's a 1200 bits per second, which Anybody ever used the modem back in the day? 2400 baud modem was pretty darn slow. This is half as fast as that. So
It was a big jump from 300.
yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So it's going to stream 7 bits across, 8 bits in a byte. So that's going to present a little challenge for me later. I'll show you. There's no parity. It's not doing any kind of checking as to whether or not the bytes it's streaming are okay. And there's 2 stop bits, and stop bits, I'm sure some of you are more technical than me, but stop bits are basically a way of synchronizing the sender and the receiver to make sure that the data isn't streaming too fast or too slow, and everything is all synced up there so that the data is coming across in a way that's understandable. So digging into Python, going, how on earth am I going to do this? Hey, PySerial, thank you, Google. So there's a lot of docs on PySerial. And I think I just need to make this smaller so that I can pull all my tabs up here. I'll try that. So pyserial.sourceforge.net. Something you always look for when you head out to SourceForge is when was the last time they published this code? Because oh my gosh, you might be in no man's land. But PySerial was last published last October. It's it's pretty recently updated, and thankfully it runs on Python 3, which is frankly one of the biggest problems with any newbie coming into the Python world is what the heck's going on with this 2 to 3 conversion stuff. So PySerial's got a lot of docs out there, and it worked out well. So let's get to some code. Pretty easy, actually. Import serial, which is PySerial, right? And then I've got my port, which I needed to figure out what my port was. So you just head to your dev directory, ls, search for everything that was USB. That all was set up for me through the driver that came with my cable that goes from my serial port to my USB, which is great. So found out which port I was on, and then the docs told me what to put as the rest of the values. So that made that a lot simpler than I thought it was going to be, actually. So let's see what else I need to do. I've got a connection to my serial port. So I'm going to start reading from it. And I'm getting 8 bits, but really only 7 of them matter. And that first bit is crap. I need to get rid of it. So 127, I'm going to do a mask on it, is a binary 0 with all ones. So I'm just saying throw away that first bit, just give me everything else. So wait, is that really it? Is that really as simple as it is? Well, let's take a look. So yes, in less than 50 lines of code, this is actually what reads from the timer. Pretty simple. And let me show you that so that I can prove I'm not actually faking you out here. You see that okay? All right. So it's not going to be incredibly dramatic, but I've got the timer on. I'm going to run my timer reader. It tells me I'm connected. And you should see DT 8000 new bold products. Yay! So all that means is that what I thought might be one of the trickiest pieces of the whole thing was actually not. So I'm able to now read from the timer, thanks to PySerial. So yeah, there is no rest, less than 50 lines of code for the whole reader, so on to the simulator. So why do I need a simulator? We talked about this a little bit, that this timer is not something I want to keep around my house. I don't want to break it. It's going to be an eBay crapshoot if I do break it. So I need to get it out. I need to use it only for race day. I need to make sure that any other timer that is used in the future has a good interface to this software. So what I wound up doing is timing a race and writing that timer not just to my database, which I'm using SQLite for, but I'm also writing to a log. So my timer simulator is just a pretty easy read of that log and crank through. So the data that actually comes across from the timer is in order of placement. So the first, the best time was actually in lane 3, okay? And it goes all the way out. The worst time was in lane 2. And then this right here represents my buy. So I have 8 total lanes I can run. I only have 7 lanes actually enabled. And that last lane didn't finish. So that could either be a buy, which is a space holder that I've set up, or that could be some poor kid's car falling off the track and not finishing. All right, so let's talk about the race results display. So I'm going to go ahead and run through the timer simulator here. If I can find my cursor. So timer simulator is going to delete everything. It's going to start us fresh. And I figure I should probably pause for a moment and just make sure that the world doesn't come crumbling down around me for showing blue and gold on a screen in a Buckeye building here. I will distinguish that this is blue and gold, not maize and blue, for anybody that's concerned about it. So,
A storm is coming.
a storm may be coming. So this is the piece that's important to the folks sitting on the other end of the track. They got to pull the cars and place them at the correct lane at the top of the track. And when the race starts running, I'm going to close that because I don't need that anymore. I'm going to go ahead and kick off a time. Okay? So that just simulated the timing happening, and the people that were in the currently racing just moved up and their times have displayed. So this, from a visual software piece, I mean, if you're looking for an incredible UI, there's not much to the UI on race day here. This is just a very simple display what the timer results had and make sure it marries up to the folks that just raced. And the DNF is for a did not finish. So it just continues to piece together pieces and parts of the data as it's flowing through the system. Lane 3 won the heat. And if we go back over here, lane 3 at 2:57. So I can go ahead and actually start cranking out more times, and we can see that I'm not just faking you out, that the display is actually updating. Okay? Now, one of the other challenges that I have here is I'm going to go ahead and apply all the times because I know the one at the end is a timer misfire. So now if I head back up here, I've got my winner that took no seconds getting down the track. Sometimes if somebody takes a flash picture or something at the end of the track, it's going to create a light situation that causes the photo sensor to go off and the timer to misfire. So I need the ability to back a race up. And actually, I decided that rather than spend a whole lot of time on something that may or may not occur very frequently, I'm just going to use my domain model to help me from IPython notebook just call a couple methods here to reverse the race. So I can go ahead and crank out IPython notebook and load up a derby and call this method called rerun prior race. And it's just going to say I'm going to back up from race 34 to 33. And when we head back over here, you can see on the bottom I'm now at race 33, and we're back, and we can rerun that race again with no trouble. Okay? All right, so this is really one of the big things that got me into doing this in the first place, is the operator interface and working with Django. So Django is an incredibly cool tool. Many of you have probably already used it. The great thing about it is I'm not a UI guy. I'm not looking to create the world's greatest UI. I got somebody sitting there running races at the end of a track and nobody's going to see this screen. I just need a quick and dirty way for people to be able to manage the roster and manage the race. So I just threw together a quick and dirty Django admin interface for this, which is phenomenal. It lets me write my admin classes without having to actually write any UI code. Now, I don't mind UI code. I mean, it's not a big deal, but it's not really where I wanted to spend my time on this. So, for example, if I want, all the kids are in different grades or ranks, right? So I can set up my grade lookup, and then we can, on the racers, you get your grade pull down, and it keeps people from going out of boundaries for their lookups and things like that for pieces and parts of the roster. So I've also got a little tag here as to whether or not the racer is eligible, so I might have a roster, but that racer might have come in overweight, or they might not have showed up on race day, or their name might be misspelled or whatever, so I can go through and I can very quickly admin this whole thing. So piecemeal, putting together pieces and parts, but for doing it over a couple of weekends and doing it with new technologies, this was an incredibly easy thing to do. And frankly, the free Django docs are better than some of the tech books that are out there that you can pull off the shelves. It's incredible for a newbie. All right. So testing, I mentioned before I want to unit test everything. I want to make sure that my code is going to stand the test of time, that my intent is out there for everything that I'm doing. So thankfully Python has unit test built in, which is what I started with. But at work with .NET, I was using this tool called SpecFlow. And then SpecFlow is for doing more behavior-driven design kind of development. So TDD is really evolving more into BDD. And the concept with behavior-driven design is you want to tell your user story. You want to, you don't want to just say 1 + 1 should equal 2. You want to say why you're trying to get 1 + 1 to equal 2, right? So behave is an incredibly slick way to do this. And this might be the most technical piece I get to here. Sorry for that if you were hoping for more on the technology side, but actually this is incredibly powerful stuff. So in my project, I have, it might help to start with PyCharm actually. In my project here, I have a features folder. And if you create a features folder and .feature files, you can actually write user stories in a language called Gherkin. And Gherkin is essentially, if you're familiar with Ruby, you're probably more familiar with Gherkin, but it's essentially an English story that allows you to have some variables and things in it, and then from there, do your unit tests. So, unit tests are great, they're quick and dirty, that kind of thing, but if you actually want to get to a place where you're saying, here's what I want my software to do, you can do some pieces and parts of Gherkin and use behave to do it. So here's my feature which is just a description of what I'm trying to test. And they try and stress in order to, as I want to get you to a place where you're thinking of what you want to test from a user standpoint or from an actor standpoint, who you are, what the use case is, and then what you actually want to get out of it. So you put the scenario outline out there, which is a given when then statement. And then if you want, you can have tables that give you some data. So I'm going to test that that the timer results are correctly handled. So I've got a little bit going on there. And when you run out to your command line and you type behave in that root folder, it'll actually take a look at your feature file and it will run through all your tests if you've written them. So I've got this test out here, and it's all passing. I have something here that I haven't implemented yet. So when I get to the bottom, it's going to say you can implement your step definitions for undefined steps. So you don't just have your feature file. You also, beneath it, are going to have steps, which are just regular old Python code. And they're decorated kind of like how Flask is, with a little decorator on top of your method that matches the English statement that you've made, and then you can implement the step, and it's just regular old unit testing kinds of things. So the nice piece is, if you want to sort of test the same kind of thing over and over, you get some reuse out of it as long as you write your English statement the same way. It gives you really a simple English statement about the intent of what you're trying to test. Okay? All right, one last thing, publish results. So I cheated. I didn't use Python for publishing the results. I probably could publish the results using pandas now that I've been to the pandas talk and know a little bit more about how to do that, but that would probably be hard for my other Cub Scout parents to really get into. So went out to Google Docs, right? This is kind of back to what I had talked about before about figuring out what the best tool is for the job. So using a SQLite database, great. I'm going to go ahead and run some reports out of that, paste those into a spreadsheet here, basically put the awards that the kids got out there, I've got detail on each racer and how they did on each race, what lane they ran in, what place they came in, and then I've got the raw data that comes out of the database, which is kind of not really as human readable. Sometimes you are forced to store something in a way that is much more efficient for the machine and much less efficient for the human being. But then, power of pivot tables. And pivot charts in Google Docs. There is a nice little pivot chart function. Let me see if I can shrink this down a little bit, make it easier for you all to see. So here are some of the competitors. And the thing with racing these derby cars is you're not always going to race against the people you think you're going to race against. The faster cars are going to move up in the ranks. Your family members, you might be in different racing classes, and you're not going to race against them. So that's fine. After race day, you can go ahead and take the published results and come out here to the chart, and I can clear everybody, find my family, put them all together, and put them head to head. So gives the families a little bit of a chance to play around with the data themselves and see how everybody did. And I think it's pretty interesting to note that I spent way more time on the software than I did on my car. So I'm pretty far off the charts here and losing badly. And the most consistent, well-racing car is the Hello Kitty car of doom. It is. So What kind of software was needed? A reader for the timer, PySerial saved the day. A race results display, Django, and a little bit of Flask, because I was playing around with which web framework I wanted to use. So what I showed you today was Flask, but it actually started in Django. I kept my admin interface in Django. And then a way to publish the results. I gave myself a check minus for using Google Docs, but hey, Python isn't the magic hammer for everything. So let's talk a little bit about some of my NOOB adjustments to a new ecosystem. You're going to probably think, hey, a NOOB, he's going to say white space is significant white space stinks. Well, actually, it didn't stink at all. But it was awkward not having an end statement. It was awkward getting to the end of my block and dedenting 2 or 3 levels and going, where am I at right now? And that also kind of came out when I was trying to copy and paste example code from other places. Obviously, you got to fix your indents there. Not a showstopper, just an adjustment, something to kind of think about. Tuples just were weird to me to start with. I mean, having done Perl back in the day, you've got scalars, you've got associative arrays, and you've got lists. And why do you need 2 kinds of lists? A tuple? What the heck? Well, it's once I got over that and realized it's just another word for an array, and you're doing it so that you have an immutable object that you can use as a key in your dictionary. Perfect. Made all the sense in the world. But at first, that was a little bit of a weird concept. So there's some as you know, free floating built-in functions. And, I better don my asbestos suit again because I'm going to say it felt a little bit like VB using left and, these kind of free-floating things to use sorted and bin and int and those kinds of things. Those first-class functions were a little bit of an adjustment, but it actually turned out to be much more simple to write some things because I didn't have to make everything a class. Magic methods were very weird as a noob coming in until I found this very concise explanation of magic methods and how they're used and what they're for, and all the magic was really well explained there. So when if you want to take a look at my slide presentation when it's up and click through the link, this whole eggs, easy install, pip package management thing is still a bit of a weird evolving story. And there's a lot of documentation out there that's old or outdated. And, pip for a while there wasn't working very well or didn't come prepackaged with Python. And thankfully, Python 3.4 pip is there. It's ready to go. It's all set up. Made life a lot easier. Figuring out the idioms in Python, what is Pythonic? It's pretty hard for a noob. You're going to come into Python from Java or .NET or Ruby or something like that, and you're going to start writing Python like it's Java or .NET or Ruby, and that's not really how it's intended to be. But the important thing is Python accepts it, it runs it, you can do it that way, and it's more important to write code than it is to write Pythonic code. But it's important to really look at what the proper idioms are within the language. And then this whole Python 2 thing, I got to be honest, never having done Python 2, I wanted everything to be Python 3, and it wasn't. That was really hard. So going from adjustments to headaches, this became the message of doom for me. This was my Hello Kitty car of doom. Every darn time you pip install something, you got to watch out for these print or accept lines that say, oh geez, the package I'm trying to pull from isn't a Python 3 ready package. So there's documentation out there on PyPy that tells you what's ready and what's not, but oftentimes this is what told me what was ready and what's not. So honestly, this is a bit of a hard thing for newbies coming into the Python ecosystem. So when you first learn a new language, and I mean an English language, a Spanish language, a French language, you're trying to translate your words. So you want to know that hello is hola. It's really helpful coming from .NET to know what the Python equivalent is of some of the things that you know. So, NuGet in .NET is pip. Visual Studio is, PyCharm, at least in my world. MS Test became unit test. MVC is Django. The Web API is Flask. Entity Framework. You've got some interesting things going on with SQL Alchemy, Django's ORM, and South. And I guess the new version of Django is going to have its own migration in it. But SQL Alchemy is a very powerful ORM, and it's really tricky to get the kinds of things you want out of Django without using their ORM. So it's very opinionated there. SpecFlow became Behave for me. But the interesting thing for me was that no virtual environment concept in .NET and no IPython notebook. And IPython notebook is incredible. It was an incredible learning tool for me as I went through this process. So I promised whoever won the family competition would get their picture up. So there's my daughter sticking her tongue out at all of us Pinewood Derby losers. So in conclusion, Python is the awesome sauce. It really helped me get to where I needed to be on this. And I really appreciate the folks at PyOhio letting a Python noob come in and kind of talk to folks that know a heck of a lot more about the language, but about my experience building something new as an experienced developer, but a completely inexperienced Python person. So I must ask you a question. Any questions? Sure.
Hello? Yeah, so I just wanted to say it was really, I think, a good perspective to bring, as a sort of a newcomer to Python, to bring up your concerns and your difficulties learning that language with a crowd like this, because normally the group would be so homogenous. It's hard to see those kinds of issues because we've all gone through those, but it's been years since then. Mm-hmm. And just having someone remind us where improvements can be made to documentation or to tools in order to help facilitate the learning of the language, I think that's really helpful for the community.
Yeah, and there's a whole lot of stuff out there that still points to Python 2 docs, which you just have to kind of watch the URL and make sure that something hasn't changed from 2 to 3. And there's a lot of people that are still validly on 2. It makes a lot of sense for those folks, but not for somebody who's trying to come into it. So thanks. Yeah.
This is really cool. What do you want to add to it next?
I want it to run on Raspberry Pi. I want to take some of the little kludgy admin interface things that I did within IPython Notebook just for the one-offs and actually put functionality in. I know that Django actually will let you, within that admin interface, define functions that you can call, which is really cool. And I've actually already gone down that road and I backed it all out because first talk, live demo, didn't want to mess with that, but it actually works really well that way. So as I kind of develop those sorts of like helper pieces in IPython Notebook and using my API, then I can kind of port that stuff back over to the UI functionality and make it completely seamless for somebody to just plug it in, make sure that all the equipment's running, and go ahead and run a race, because it is really, really stressful in front of tons of parents, tons of kids, a lot of work that went into that, and to have to worry about your software crapping out. So, what else?
Have you thought about totally rewriting the timer with Raspberry Pi? Is that what you're referring to?
Not the timer, no. But running the display off of the Raspberry Pi, the timer display and the admin interface, so that somebody that has a Mac, somebody that has Windows, it doesn't really matter. The timer software isn't actually running on your machine that you got to bring to race day and make sure you've got it charged up and all that kind of stuff. The prep is all done. You actually have pull a Derby timing kit out of a box, and you've got your computer and you've got your timer and everything all running and ready to go. And Django runs great on the Pi, but I'm just not, I just hadn't reached that point before I came here today to show that. So,
basically, I just want to say I did a pretty big, I guess kind of big Python project earlier this year, and using all the GPO ports and stuff like that on the Raspberry Pi. I would say it would actually be really cool if you did build a timer with all the attachments, using all the GPI opens. It actually wouldn't be as difficult as you think.
I actually have an Arduino to do that same kind of thing, and see if I can do a photo finish at the end of the track as well. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff you can do with hardware. And the neat piece is that as we get into the Internet of Things, you have all this equipment in your house that's going to be talking to your Wi-Fi network and all that kind of stuff. It's all been made so completely simple and easy, but not as customizable as maybe you'd want. And so learning how to leverage those kinds of hardware things in your home and for home automation and for those other kinds of things is huge. And the fact that Python lets you do that with some really mature libraries is a huge win. What else? Well, you've been a very gentle audience. Thank you.